Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Steph and today I'm going to be chatting with you about the 22 books that I want to read in 2022. I did make one of these videos last year for 2021 and then I made a follow-up a year later to see how many did I complete. This year I decided to do the same thing, but it did take me a little while to put this list together, and I filmed this video once already and it didn't work out, so I'm filming it a second time. Why am I telling you this? Because I have already read some of the books on this list, so I will let you know if I have, but out of these 22 books I still have a lot more to go, so I'm looking forward to sharing them with you. And if you have read any of these, let me know in the comments, or if they're on your TBR, let me know that as well. I'm looking forward to sharing these with you, so if you like this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe to my channel. I know I say it over and over, but it really does make a difference in the growth of my channel and allows more people to find my videos. So thank you so much for being here, and without further ado, we're going to get started. On this list, you're going to find a lot of romance books, some fantasy and romance books, some historical romance, and a few classic books, and of course, books with disability representation. The first three on this list are ones I did not get to in 2021. I had made the goal of reading and annotating all 6 of Jane Austen's novels. I accomplished that with 3 of the books, so this year I'm hoping to get to Emma, Sense and Sensibility, and Mansfield Park. Those are 3 that are on my to-do list for this year. Next up we have A Very Merry Bromance. This was just announced not too long ago from Alyssa K. Adams, and this is coming out in the fall of 2022, which I'm super excited for because I just love the series. Yes, it is open door, but just the comedy and the humor and the way she develops these characters always just cracks me up and has my heart. So I'm excited to get to this. Next up we have The Buy-In from Emma St. Clair. I so enjoy her stories. I just discovered her last year and read her Love Cliché series, and this is a spin-off off of one of the families that we meet in that series. So this can be read as a standalone or part of the series, but it is the first of a new series. I did get a chance to read this one already and loved it. Had a chance to read an advance copy of it and definitely recommend. Next up, In Search of a Prince. I love royalty romance stories. I have a couple videos about them, and this I was so excited to read. This is about Brie. Been in America her whole life, but she's actually the heir to an African throne, African kingdom. So we get to see how that evolves as the story continues. I just finished reading an advance copy of this not too long ago. Not only is the cover stunning, but the story was so good as well, so definitely worth checking out if you're interested. Next up we have Maid of Dishonor. This came out in the fall of 2021. I love the author, but I haven't read this book yet, and it sounds so good. Friends to lovers. I love the color of the cover, and I can't wait to get to this one soon. Next up we have is Turn to Me by Becky Wade. I've read the first 2 in this trilogy. The main male character is kind of a dark horse, and we don't really know too much about him. We know he's had a troubled past, and he's kind of separated himself from his childhood friends. So we're going to see how that distance is kind of crossed as they reunite in this book and see more about him and his journey. So I'm excited to get to this one coming out in May of this year. Next up we have A Curse So Dark and Lonely. As I said, I'm looking for disability rep as well as lots of other entertaining romance or fantasy books, and this kind of covers it all. This is about a main female character who I believe has cerebral palsy. It's also a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It's the start of the trilogy. I've heard some people say this is the best in the trilogy, but it's one that's been on my list to get to forever, and I just haven't. Partially because I want to listen to it on audio, and I really should just request it from my library, because right now they don't have it available to borrow on audio. And it's a pretty long book. I want to say it's like 500 pages, somewhere around there. So I find that easier to get through sometimes with audio, but it's also a young adult book. That is always a little bit of a faster read for me. So either way, I'm hoping I can get to this book this year, figure out what the hype is all about. Next up we have Once Upon a Broken Heart. I talked recently in my fantasy books video about the Caraval series. This is a follow-up, a new series, so don't expect it to be a standalone. This is something that can be read independently, but definitely has a cliffhanger ending. I'm saying this because I did get the chance to read this a few weeks ago. Thoroughly enjoyed it, but really was appreciative of those who had shared online that this was not going to be a conclusive story. There's more coming to the story. We're left with this anticipation of what's coming next. So I've really enjoyed this one. I really like Stephanie Garber's writing, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what else she comes up with. Next up we have These Hollow Vows. I heard great things about this one. I have listened to this, loved it. Can't wait for book 2 to come out later this year, and I believe it's going to be a trilogy, so I'm definitely excited to see what happens next in this great story. Next up, we have Rule of Wolves. So I had mentioned in my fantasy book video that I had started reading the Grisha series with Shadow and Bone, read the trilogy, read the Six of Crows duology, and then I had read King of Scars. Kind of took a little bit of a break before getting the audiobook for Rule of Wolves, but it was worth the wait because it was so good. Such an amazing, fantastic, conclusive ending, and just what I needed for Nikolai and Zoya. So lots of surprises along the way, but I was so glad that I read this. So that was definitely on my list. Glad I got this one. Next up, we have Archer's Voice. I included this because it's on so many lists on Goodreads for like disability inclusion and representation. I believe the main male character is mute by choice, but I think he also has some sort of disability thrown in there. I'm not 100% sure, but it's rated super well on Goodreads, and basically the reviews all make it sound like it's amazing. So I don't know what kind of content it is romance-wise, but it seems like something that's really great and something I need to check out. So that's something I'm hoping to get to this year. Next up, we have another super hyped book. This is Heart in the Highlands. So I love Scottish romance stories. I've mentioned them before on my channel and on my Instagram page. And this one has just literally gotten all rave reviews, 5-star reviews from all my friends on Bookstagram. So I'm like, I need to put this on my radar and bump this up my TBR. So that is why it is on this list. Definitely need to get to this year. Next up, we have Sarah Eden's next book in her Gents series. This is a Georgian romance called Lily of the Valley. I'm intrigued to see kind of where this goes, so I'm excited to see what this story has in store. Next up, we have the next Katie Bailey story. I believe this is a new standalone at this point, and I'm excited to see where she goes with this because I really enjoyed her first 2 books, The Roommate Situation and The Neighbor War, which I loved. Some of my top romances of 2021. So she has a new one coming out this year called So That Happened, and I'm excited to check this out and see what shenanigans this rom-com has in store. Next up, we have another rom-com I'm looking forward to. This is called Pretending I Love Lucy. I love Julia's stories as well. She first published last year, mostly Real McCoy. And then, oh my gosh, I can picture the cover, My Own Worst Enemy. This is the 3rd in her Apple Valley series, and all of her books have some sort of correlation or scenes that take place at the local library. And I believe both of the main characters for this one are working at the library. And I love stories that take place at the library. I love the library personally, so I'm excited to see what happens with this story coming out very soon. Next up, we have A Line in the Sand from Terry Wilson. I really enjoyed Spot of Trouble, and this is taking place in the same setting, Turtle Beach, and it's a sweet, small coastal town, and I loved the vibes from the first one. I loved the romance. It just feels very real, sweet, lighthearted, made me laugh, and I just loved the tension between the characters in book 1. I'm really excited to get to read this story. This is about a marine biologist and a woman who plays a mermaid at the local aquarium as part of her job. So interested to see. You can see a dog on the cover, so I'm excited to see what shenanigans, the dog involves with the romance story. I just love romance stories with dogs, so I'm excited to check them out and see what happens in this story coming out later in 2022. Next up, we have Well Matched. I have read the first 2 books in this series. This one came out in October of 2021, and I haven't read it yet, so I'm excited to check this one out. And the author did announce that there was going to be a 4th book in this series. So that is something I'm looking forward to later this year, and obviously I have to read book 3 before I read book 4, so that's something on my agenda this year. Next, we have In the Waves of Tristwig by Deborah Hathaway. She's mentioned in my indie authors book, my indie author recommendation video. I love her writing. I love the series. I've read them out of order, but I've loved them all independently anyway. They're fantastic. They are loosely connected, but you can be read, sequentially or as standalones. This book, I had the privilege of reading. It was so good, so good, so great. I love that we have a character with a hidden past, so she's kind of secretive and mysterious to our main guy, and she ends up being caught in one of his nets when she's swimming out in the ocean, and he is a fisherman. His crew helps rescue her from the net. That lends this whole very kind of mysterious air to her, and she needs to recoup at his family's home with his mother and his sister. So we get to see some friendships start to develop as he's still kind of not trusting her. I don't want to say too much, but it's so good and definitely worth reading. She's fantastic, so definitely worth checking out. Next up we have When in Rome. This is the next Sarah Adams book. I've mentioned her previously, and I have read all of her books to date, which have all been indie published, and her most recent one, The Cheat Sheet, just got picked up by a publishing company. So this is her first book that she is writing with the publishing company, so I'm excited to check this one out. Last but not least on this list, I ended up reading a few Jules Verne's stories. Which ones did I read? 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Journey to the Center of the Earth. I read both of these last year, so I thought if I'm trying to incorporate more classics into my reading, I would check out another of his books, Around the World in 80 Days. I remember this from my childhood, and I had a computer game. I don't know if anybody else had this. We had a computer game where we could like travel around the world with this character, and we got to basically live out this story and do interactive games. Knowing my parents, they were probably educational, but I just remember really liking it, and I want to check out the story and just revisit it and see how fun it is to be a part of this author's imaginative and forward-thinking story, because a lot of his stories, from what I've gathered since listening to a few of his books on audio, a lot of his books were very forward-thinking for his time. He wrote these in, I believe, the mid-1800s, so he's really kind of creating stories before these things really existed. For example, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was written before the invention of the submarine, and certain things that he mentions that are fictitious during his lifetime ended up, really coming into existence later on. So I think it's kind of cool and really interesting. So I'd like to dive into another story of his this year. And that wraps up this list. If you've read any of them, let me know. If they're on your TBR too, let me know that as well. And I would love to hear from you. So thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you guys in my next video. Hope you find a book that brings some sunshine to your day. Bye!